This is Paul T. Taylor, and you're listening to the Then Is Now podcast, you lucky so-and-sos.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
Hi, this is Re-Gor, host of Then Is Now podcast and The East Meets the West. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. We appreciate your support as we grow the audience for our shows. You could find our links to our Patreon page as well as our TeePublic page at havenpodcasts.com. With Patreon, you'll get a lot of exclusive stuff, including our monthly pop culture newsletter, cool gifts, discounts for TeePublic, and our special exclusive show, Then Is Now Filmmaker series, in which we interview directors, producers, writers, composers, special effects guys, basically anybody who works behind the scenes in film and television, and get their insights into the process of creating films and TV shows. Also at our TeePublic page, you'll find cool merch that you can get or even give to others as gifts. You can find those links at our website, or you can go directly to teepublic.com/stores/havenpodcasts and patreon.com/thenisnowpodcast. Enjoy!
What kind of a sick school is this?
Uh-oh, don't know!
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Oh, righty then.
How you doing?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist. Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Say hello to my little friend!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
What are you people? On dope?
Stop whining.
I got a crap on deck that can choke a donkey.
Who is your daddy?
I'm sorry, but all questions must be submitted in writing.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Can I do that?
I'll be back.
A dynamite! Show me the money!
Don't! Up your nose with your rubber hose.
A what?
I'm sailing! I'm sailing!
Groovy.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
Here's looking at you, kid.
We got no food, we got no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off!
Come to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
Hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey!
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
I love it when a plan comes together.
What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
We're on a mission from God.
Hello and welcome to yet another fabulous episode of Then Is Now podcast. I'm your host, Re-Gor, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Esper. How's things, Chris?
Things are good. I've mostly been busy working, but, can't complain.
Yeah, exactly. Did you get a lot of snow last weekend?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
My driveway was pretty much, flooded with, 2 feet of snow. No matter what I did to shovel, I would have to, go back out, shovel some more. But, again, no matter what I did, driveway was filling up, and there was nothing I could have done about it. So, yeah, I was pretty much stuck in 2 feet of snow for, a day.
Yeah, it was pretty bad up here, too, in Maine. I'm not way far up in Maine, though, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But the worst part is it rained a few days afterwards, the last couple of days, and then our driveway is like a huge sheet of ice. Because it's a dirt driveway, so when the when the landlord plows it, it doesn't go all the way to the ground. So
sure.
I went to walk out yesterday. My wife went off to work with our grandson, and I was just going for a walk, and I stepped onto the driveway and I stopped, but I was sliding to the left.
Oh my!
And it's a slope, so what I ended up doing was I basically slid all the way over to the snowbank in the grass, and then walked through the snow to get to those, to get out to the street.
Yeah, it was pretty much the same situation here too. My landlords came and they plowed the driveway, but then the following weekend is when we got the rain and ice storm, so that my driveway was full of ice. It was like an ice rink, and
Yeah.
I already slipped and fell twice, so that was fun. But
Oh, jeez.
I'm like, all I'm doing is just take out the trash.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, it was so bad. Patsy the Angry Nerd and I were supposed to record with a special guest the 20th episode of The East Meets the West, and that was last Sunday, but we had to postpone it because Pat's Wi-Fi typically goes out whenever we get snow.
Oh, that sucks.
So I do want to apologize to the audience for a lot of these episodes have been delayed. There's just a lot going on between you and I, Chris, with our schedules, and then we've had a lot of COVID things going on around here and work and all that stuff. So we'll try to get back on track and get into a regular groove again soon. Usually I try to release them have them edited by Thursday or Friday, but then sometimes just things happen. But I did want to mention, too, I want to bring up, if the folks at home that are listening, if you're enjoying our shows, please go to wherever you listen to your apps, and especially iTunes, and give us a great review, because that'll bump us up on the list where they'll recommend us. The more good reviews we have, the more visibility we will be to people who maybe don't listen or never heard of the show, and they can find us a lot better. So we'd love for you to do that. And as I mentioned, our sister show is The East Meets the West, where we take a fun dive into the kung fu films of the Chinese production company, the Shaw Brothers, as well as westerns that were produced in Italy, known as spaghetti westerns. And each episode, we do one of each of those films, and we discuss and sometimes compare and contrast. And both the Shaw films and spaghetti westerns were produced mainly from the 60s to the 80s. So we have a blast over there. Chris, you got to come on sometime. I'd love to hear your opinion on these movies.
I like to check them out because I can't say I've seen very many of those movies.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe for the 25th, we're going to have a couple of special films on that one. So
nice.
I'll let you know. That'll be cool. And then real quick, just wanted to dive into a little pop culture here. As we mentioned before, there's a lot of cool comic book movies and TV shows coming out this year. I've been catching up on Peacemaker, although my wife doesn't like that show, so I have to wait till she's not home. But I did rediscover a show. It's on Prime, and I'd forgotten about this, and I loved it. It's you ever hear of a show called MXC, Most Extreme Elimination Challenge?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's on Prime, and it is the funniest friggin' thing ever. It is so funny.
Oh really?
It's this Japanese show called Takeshi's Castle, and it's like if you've ever seen, and especially folks at home, if you've ever seen the show Wipeout that John Cena hosted. Wipeout is basically a version of this show. Only, in Japan, the rules of safety are far less. These people look like they're really getting hurt on some of these things they got to jump through or jump over. Oh man, these two guys, Kenny Blankenship and Vic. Kenny Blankenship and Vic. I forget what the other guy's name is. I should know it. Vic Romano. They do the voiceover. So there's two guys that host it, but they dub their own voices for the two hosts, and they do it like a play-by-play. So it's like you're watching a sports show, but they're making all kinds of things up, like, oh, he did the double turtle somersault. That's crazy, Oh, he's fallen into the scary uncle position. Oh, no. And there's so many innuendos in everything that they say. It's hilarious.
That's awesome.
So I recommend, folks, if you have Amazon Prime, check it out. It's called MXC, which stands for Most Extreme Elimination Challenge. And also, I wanted to give out a plug to my friend Bill, who, Chris, I don't think you've been on the show with him, Bill Van Ryn. He publishes a book or a magazine called Drive-In Asylum. And it's basically, he's got interviews and articles, and it's also primarily centered around the old movie ads from the newspapers.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article for the most recent one, which I did a retrospect on 50 years of Dr. Phibes. So people should check that out. He's on Etsy. Just look up Groovy Doom. And he does a show every Saturday night where basically there's 3 segments. He'll have a guest or two on the show. I was on it once. I accidentally fell asleep. I missed the last segment, but so they'll get on the first segment, talk about a movie they're about to watch, and then we'll all go away. He'll shut off the feed, and usually he tries to make it so that everyone can find the film. So it'll be like on YouTube or Tubi or something, and then come back, talk about the first film, then start to talk about the second film, go back and watch the second film, and at this point it's like 1 in the morning or whatever. And then watch, and then talk about the second film. So just look up Groovy Doom on Facebook or YouTube, and you'll find it there, and then you can find out, on YouTube you can watch past episodes. You probably watched the one where I passed out. And
nice.
I'm sure he cut to my camera, and it was just the microphone and the computer and nobody.
Yeah, just nobody there. That's funny. I love those old movie ads, though. Those things are really cool.
Oh yeah, they're so amazing.
Yeah, I also have a fascination with the old TV spots that you would see on television, like promote those 15 to 30-second spots where they would promote the movie, just like the way that they were always cut and the narrator's voice. Those things were just fun. They don't do it like that anymore.
No, they don't. Even some of those radio ads too for horror movies.
Yeah.
They make them sound way scarier than they are.
Oh sure, yeah. Totally.
That's awesome. So what have you been checking out lately if you've had time?
Very little because of a limited amount of time. But usually what I find myself doing during work hours, if there's just a lull and there's just nothing going on, I find myself going back to things that are like comfort food to me, like movies or shows that I need to just unwind or just turn off my brain, and it's not something new, it's just something that I'm used to. I'll go back and I'll watch episodes of Seinfeld, or I'll watch Three's Company, let's say, just something that I've always enjoyed. So that's kind of what I've been watching lately, is watching reruns of old sitcoms, or watching a movie that I like. So yeah, it's sort of where I've been at this point in time.
That's awesome. My head is always full of movie and TV quotes, and Three's Company is a huge part of that.
Yep.
It's there's so many, I don't know if you remember the one where Chrissy's jumping up and down and she's going, "You can do it, you can do it."
Yeah,
you can,
I do.
You can. So whenever someone's trying to do something, I start doing that.
I love it. Yeah, but I have to say though, as much as I did like Chrissy, I think Terry was always my favorite blonde of the three.
Yep. Yeah, there's a chance we should reach out to her and try and get her on the show.
Yeah, totally.
Briefly, I did want to mention that we're also going to sort of retool our Patreon page and make it maybe probably a little bit more affordable for folks at home, because we really would love your support, and we got some awesome merchandise to get for you. So we'll let you know about that. And that's about it. So up next, we've got a guy who directed a documentary about mom-and-pop video stores from the 80s and 90s. So sit back and get ready for a fun interview. And if the young people in your life don't know what a video store is, this show will help you educate them. Class is in session.
I have a bad feeling about this.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Food fight!
Hey, you in my class?
I am today.
I think you should consider transferring to shop class. Woo-woo! Now, very few students are severely injured in shop class.
Bueller.
When you were in school,
Bueller.
did you ever cut class?
Bueller.
Yeah, I guess I did. Sure, most kids cut classes.
Good, sign this. He's sick.
I get so lonely when I hear that third attendance bell ring and all my kids are not here.
7 years of college down the drain.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
You lack discipline. As long as I'm here, there will be no grades or gold stars or demerits. We're gonna have recess all the time.
Woo!
Go, play, and have fun now.
Okay, folks, we've got a great guest on the show today. He's an actor, writer, producer, and director. He's also the owner of Universe Retro, an online shop that specializes in 80s, 90s, and now items, especially band t-shirts. He's the founder of Tiny Terror Con, Hickory, North Carolina's first and finest horror convention. And he's also the co-host at Eye for Eye Productions video podcast. His latest project, a documentary called Mom and Pop, the indie video store boom of the 80s and 90s, is soon to be released and looks to be totally amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the show Bobby Canipe Jr.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. We're so glad you could be here. So excited to talk about this. So, first of all, tell us how you got onto the path of being a filmmaker.
Yeah, I grew up. I always had an affinity for movies. I just loved them. My mom had me when she was really young. She was only 17, so she kind of grew up with me. And she liked horror movies, so we would go to the video store, every weekend and rent whatever. She let me watch anything. So by the time I was probably 6 or 7, I had watched all the mainstream horror stuff like the Freddy's, the Jason, stuff like that, and I started kind of delving into the low budget shot on video stuff literally at 8, 9, 10 years old. Mom would let me watch whatever I wanted, so I'd go in, I'd get Cannibal Camp Out or 555 or Lunch Meat, the real crazy low budget stuff.
Yeah.
So I watched it all, and then about 10 years ago, me and a buddy decided, hey, let's make a movie, so we just kind of made a movie locally, ended up winning Best Regional Feature at South Carolina Monster Con, and we were
nice.
like, that's pretty cool. So then I started having my kids and everything, so I kind of put it on the back burner. And recently, when I got about a year ago, I kind of jumped back into it because of this interest I had in making this mom and pop documentary. And since then, it's led to a lot of opportunities that I got booked for this year. So yeah, I guess the answer to your question would be I've always been into movies, and the next logical step for me was make the movies that I can't find to watch on my own.
Nice. That's awesome. Can you tell us about some of the projects that you started on before, that you worked on before?
Yeah. The first thing I ever did at all on a set was there was a web series that came out it was about 2011, 2012, somewhere right around there. It was called The Dark, and it was just a local kind of thing. It was kind of like the way the director called it was like a darker Harry Potter, I guess you could say. So I went on the set just as a PA because I thought, hey, I love movies. This guy's offering to let me come work on one. So I went. I just loved seeing how everybody was running their cameras and their lights. And I liked watching how the director kind of had a vision in his head and he made it a reality. So that was my initial foray into actually being on a set, and it was really cool. And then literally as soon as that production was over, it was only a few days, I literally told my buddies, let's make a movie. And it ended up being what they call, it was going to be a full-length feature called Bloody Bones. But it ended up being worked into a anthology film we created called Night Whispers. And that was the one that won Best Regional Feature that I was talking about earlier.
That's awesome. Would you say that video stores had a lifespan of roughly 30 years? That's my recollection.
Yeah, I would say so. The first video store started about 1977. And kind of what I've tracked down is it started in Germany as a guy that was like, okay, I can buy these tapes. At the time, there wasn't many tapes. There was maybe 50 to 100 total. So he thought I can just buy them all. So he bought one copy of all, and he just started renting them himself. Then as VCRs kind of grew more, by about 1980, 1981, it started to just become routine. People could, start watching it themselves. So they figured out a way we can just rent these movies. People don't have to pay $100, $150 for a tape. So people would buy them, rent them out, stuff like that. And then when that kicked off and people just loved it, it just kept growing. So through the 80s and 90s, especially, was their heyday. And then from 2000 to 2010 was about kind of like the era of Hollywood videos, blockbusters, stuff like that. So I'd say 80s, 90s, and the early 2000, 2010 is really when it was, booming.
Yeah. I mean, my kids were born in the early 2000s, and they have vague recollections of going to the video store where we, rent either a movie or like a PS2 game or something. And it's just those days were so much fun. Even like back in the day, when my father bought a VCR, I think like around 1980 or something, it was a top-loading one.
Oh, yeah.
But he was afraid to actually join a video store to rent movies. I think he thought it was going to be too expensive or something, and then I finally talked him into it. So that was really interesting. But I also used to work at a Blockbuster Video in the early 90s when I was like 19 or 20.
Yeah, I worked at a Hollywood Video. It was my first job I ever had was when I was about 14, and I worked at a little grocery store, but I only worked there for 2 years because I was waiting until I turned 16 because I wanted to work at a video store so bad. So when I turned 16, I started working for the Hollywood Video that lived nearby, and I actually worked for Hollywood Video all the way until it went out of business. So it was a good job. It was one of the bigger retailers, of videos. But I still tell everybody it was one of the best jobs I ever had.
That's awesome.
And where did you say where you grew up, or what area did you grow up in?
I grew up in North Carolina. I'm still there now. A town called Hickory, North Carolina. I grew up in a small town called Cat Square, North Carolina. And it's so small that, like the local big chains like Hollywood Video and Blockbuster was like an hour away. Hollywood Video was probably 35 minutes away. So all we had within a 10, 15-minute radius was the little mom and pop video store. So that's kind of what we always rented from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the reason I asked was because we also had a Hollywood Videos around here. I was up in the Boston area.
Okay, yeah, they had a lot. They were the second largest corporate video store, right under Blockbuster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I grew up in Jersey, and there was Hollywood Video, Blockbuster, but then there were these like little mom and pop shops all over the place, and that was the one I remember going to the most. I lived right across the street from one, oddly enough, so I would always go there and usually always rent the same thing because that's what we would do. Yeah.
Invisible Mom.
Yeah, there was
Invisible Mom.
So Blockbusters. Yeah, Blockbusters were like, so at the high point of Blockbusters, there was about 30,000 locations of Blockbusters, which is a lot. But when you compare that to mom and pops, there was anywhere from 80,000 to 120,000 mom and pop video stores in the United States and those numbers are kind of skewed. They don't know for sure because there was a lot of gas stations that rented videos and didn't really market themselves as a video store. But they estimate between 80 and 120,000 independent or mom and pop style video stores at one point.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were tons around where we live. We'd even go to other towns just if the selection we'd already seen most everything at one store. We'd go to the next town over and check out their video stores.
Oh
yeah.
I have a funny story too, actually. And I took Chris. You've probably heard this. I've told this before on the show. When I worked at Blockbuster, there was one time where I took the videotapes for The Wizard of Oz and The Wizard of Gore, and I swapped them in the cases. And so this guy comes in, and he's got it in his hand, and he's like, I rented this for my kids, but thankfully I didn't put it on. I caught it in time. And we're like, oh, I'm so sorry.
We had when I worked at Hollywood Video, we had a similar story. I didn't do it, but I know some other people that did. There was a live-action Pinocchio movie that came out at one point, and then there was a horror movie called Pinocchio's Revenge that came out in the 90s, and they would switch those a lot.
That's awesome.
And the Jack Frost, of course.
Right,
of course.
Jack Frost and the horror.
Of course. Yeah, the Blockbuster, I remember the horror section was always downstairs. Like, if you had, you wanted to go see the horror movies, you had to go downstairs. It was like this hidden secret from all the upstairs children's movies.
That's funny. That's funny. One thing too about going to the video store that I used to love, it's kind of a lost art now, is the cover art. No pun intended.
Oh, yeah.
To that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a big topic in the documentary that we've been talking to people about, because that is a big part. A lot of times movie companies would spend more on the cover art than the actual movie cost, because going through the video store, that's the first thing you see that would draw your attention. But that worked in its favor, and then sometimes not, because a lot of times the cover art would depict something that's not in the movie at all.
Right.
But there was a time during the late 80s, early 90s where having real salacious covers was kind of like the hit. You'd have like the movie Cannibal Campout, where it shows like a very gory cover, or you'd have the Wizard big box of the movie Zombie that has just a rotting zombie on the front real big with maggots and all this stuff. And it was, let's make the most gory, eye-catching cover to kind of draw in. But yeah, that's definitely something we talked about in the documentary, is, people talking about what cover arts was impactful for them at the time.
Yeah. Well, I have a funny story about that too. I can remember walking through Blockbuster and seeing the cover for Dead Alive and being like,
yeah.
I'd be like, oh my God, that looks so great. Like, it actually scared me to look at it, but it was intriguing. Where I was like, I gotta see this movie. When I finally did years later, I'm like, that's nowhere in the movie at all.
Yeah.
But
that was very typical.
yeah, and but I gotta say though, some of those painted cover arts are like some of the most brilliant pieces of art I've ever seen. I mean, they're always they're masterpieces, and sometimes they're, like you said, they're better than the movie itself a lot of the time. A lot of times, if it was a good cover, that means the movie wasn't very good.
Yeah,
that's true.
Oh man, yeah, I've rented many movies where it looked awesome from the cover, and then it's a piece of crap.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, me too.
Oh my God, so much.
Dracula versus Frankenstein.
Oh God,
awesome cover, terrible movie.
I actually saw that on TV as a kid. I was at my father's work, and he had this little black and white TV in like the mid '70s on his desk, and I don't know where he got it from, but so I remember watching that there on like Creature Double Feature or something.
Yeah.
So what got you into, or where did you come up with the idea of creating this documentary?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, I've always loved mom and pop video stores. Growing up, I collected VHS my whole life, so I'd go into them a lot of times, especially in the 2000s when they were shut down. I'd go in, and buy out their tapes or whatever they were selling, and talk to the people that owned it. And they'd always tell like real interesting stories, about how they got started or stuff like that. So I've always kind of dug that. But really, the real big point that got me started was I was watching Netflix one night, and this was when the last Blockbuster documentary came out on Netflix. So I started watching it, and like I said, I didn't really go to Blockbuster. So these memories that people were talking about, while they were interesting, they didn't really strike a chord with me. So as soon as I got done watching that, I think I made a post on Facebook saying something like, the last Blockbuster was a really good documentary, but it never really hit me. I used to go to mom and pop stores, and then I had a whole bunch of my friends commenting about, yeah, I went to this place called Joe's Video or Community Video, and we saw this and we saw this. And I thought to myself, I was like, there's a big story to tell here. That's, I'm not going to call it the anti-Blockbuster because it's not. I don't knock Blockbuster at all. People had memories there, and that's good. But there's another story to tell, that's not being told. The little places, like I rented from Cat Square Superette, a little gas station, cut meat in the back that had a lot of things. If I don't talk about that, it'll never be talked about. Nobody will ever know it existed. And that's like most of the mom and pop video stores. This was their livelihood. They loved it. It was their small business that they ran for 30 years or whatever. And I wanted to capture that story and capture the memories and, show that there are people out there that appreciated it, And so, I got that idea and I thought, I want to make this movie, but I don't know if there's enough interest in it. So I decided to do an Indiegogo. At the time, I decided the budget would be $5,000. I was like, I can do it for $5,000. In hindsight, that was very low, and I should have come up with a higher number. But I did. That went pretty quick when you're traveling. But anyway, I made the Indiegogo, and you can do two different options with the Indiegogo. You can do basically all or nothing. If you hit the goal, you get it. If you don't hit the goal, you get nothing. Or a flexible, which means you get whatever you raise. I decided all or nothing. Leave it up to fate. If it hits, I make it. If it don't, I don't. And then within 12 days, we exceeded our goal on a 30-day campaign. So
nice.
Yeah, it was great. So I said, okay, I'm making this movie, and then we just jumped right into production.
That's awesome, dude.
That's
awesome.
Amazing.
I have tons of VHS tapes as well, and I even have tons of ones that I recorded. I'm literally not kidding you. I have probably over 1,000 that. And half of them I marked, and then the other half, I guess I got lazy over the years, and so I have no idea what's on them. So someday I'm going to go back through them and try and label them all, and if it's anything worth keeping, throw it on a digital file.
Absolutely.
In terms of like, whenever I go to like a Goodwill store or a Salvation Army or any secondhand shop that has VHS tapes, I'm always on the lookout for a movie called The Soldier from 1982 that starred Ken Wall, who was on that TV show Wise Guy. Do you know anything about this movie? Because my understanding is that if you can find it, it's very rare and very valuable on VHS.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I don't recognize the title right offhand, but there are a lot of tapes that are very valuable because people are buying a lot of these. And I don't know about this movie in particular, but there's a lot of movies that were put out and never released on DVD or released in small quantities. Or there was movies that, especially during the 80s, were distributed or self-distributed by the director themselves. They would put a bunch of their tapes in the trunk of their car and drive up and down the East or West Coast, go to every video store they've seen and be like, would you like to buy a copy of this? And a lot of times the video store would say, I can buy this tape for $20 from this guy, throw it on the shelf and rent it, compared to these studio movies that are going to cost me $100 to $150 a piece. So that's why you've seen a lot of those weird low-budget horror movies on the shelves in the 80s, because they were cheaper and easier to acquire, which in turn made it, more valuable today. But yeah, lots of tapes. I'm sure that one that you were talking about in Soldier is too. But yeah, there's a big market for collecting VHS tapes right now.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'm seeing more and more out there in these shops. And it's funny too, it's sort of an ancillary thing, I guess, between VHS and DVD. There were Laserdiscs, and I had a couple of Laserdisc players over the years, and I still do. I don't know where they are right now, but I remember, I think it was in '89 when Ghostbusters 2 came out on VHS, and I wanted to buy it, and I worked at the Blockbuster, so I could go through the catalog and order it, but it was like $100 or $90. But on Laserdisc, there was a store probably about 40 minutes from me that they would rent out Laserdiscs, same way you would, VHS tapes. And I was able to purchase Ghostbusters 2 on Laserdisc for $25, and it was widescreen.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, what about? I did real quick. I had another question, but I want to backtrack a second here. So, I have a handful of beta tapes. Are those worth anything, do you think, or?
Depending on the title. So typically beta tapes are worth less than the VHS tape, mainly because less people have a beta player to play it. But now if you have certain titles that are popular on VHS or rare on VHS, there are beta collectors out there that do like them. So I'd say basically based on the title, if you have a real popular horror movie or horror movies, I've noticed across all mediums are the ones that kind of are worth the most. So yeah, betas are. There are a smaller, market for it, but they are.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'll have to check into that. So, what sort of research went into the documentary?
Yeah. So, what I did was as soon as we hit the goal, actually right before the goal ended, because I could kind of see it on the trajectory of making it. I started small first. I thought locally. I know of these 4 or 5 video stores that I went to, so let me go there and see what they're doing now. Obviously, they were all closed, so I kind of just made a note, like, what did this one turn into? What did this one turn into? And then with the advent of social media, it's easy to reach a large audience at one time with a post. So I just started making posts in these communities saying, did you ever own a video store? Or does anybody remember this video store? And it kind of linked me up with people that would know somebody, and, I could do that. So when I realized that a lot of people from outside of North Carolina also had this, I thought we need to plan a road trip and hit some of these big ones. So that's all we did was I had buddies in, especially like the VHS collecting groups that would, that lived in like PA or they lived in Chicago or something. And they would be like, I've got these 3 video stores and I know the owner of this one. So we kind of just scheduled all that. We went on the road for almost 2 weeks and we drove everywhere. We drove just over 3,000 miles. And we would spend a whole day filming in one city, and then we'd drive and get into the hotel at 1:00 in the morning, and then we'd sleep till 6:00 in the morning, and then we'd get up and do it again. We did that for almost 2 weeks. But yeah, really Facebook has helped out a ton because, like I said, you can reach a large audience that is into these specific things and get information from them.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you interviewed former owners of video stores?
Yeah. I wanted to tell the whole story by everybody involved. So we were able to find previous owners. We were able to find current owners of people that are literally running video stores now. We talked to filmmakers that had their films self-distributed. So we talked to like Tim Ritter, who did the movie Truth or Dare and Killing Spree, which were real big in the 80s. He's self-distributed. He was one of those guys that went to the video stores with them in his trunk. So he told me stories about that. We talked to other directors of the same thing, like Donald Farmer. And then we are actually interviewing Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma at the end of this month, because, you guys, I'm sure, remember Trauma was huge in the mom and pop stores, like Toxic Avenger,
yeah.
stuff like that. So a big part of Troma's success is because of mom and pop video stores renting their movies. So we're going to talk with him. And then we're talking about the people that went there and, did this. And then we even talked to some of the actual people that work for the distribution companies. And they used to cold call video stores and be like, here's what we've got. What do you want to buy? So basically every aspect of the video store, from the people that went in the video store to the people that ran it, the people that worked there, and the people that sold the movies to them.
Huh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Now, in terms of making this film, I mean, you sort of already answered this, but did you have a full crew, or were you solo when making this project? What was the that aspect like with your crew?
Yeah, so when I first planned it, I was going to plan to do everything myself because I've been doing like little YouTube videos and stuff like that. I thought, well, it'd be just like that. But then when I started looking at it as a larger scope, I was like, there's no way I can do this to the level I want to do it by myself. So I still wanted to keep it small because I needed to for the budget. But I had a friend of mine that was pretty good, had all the camera equipment and stuff. So I asked him to be the camera guy, and I got one of my buddies just to kind of come help us set up lights or whatever. And it's just been us three the whole time.
Nice. Well, I also asked because I'm also making a documentary about video stores, oddly enough. I mean, so far I've been sort of focusing on like the communal aspect of it because I feel like that's probably my favorite memory of going to a video store is that communal aspect and talking to people versus say streaming. So can you speak to that real quick, the communal experience?
Yeah, and that's another thing that's been brought up a million times, that people to remember. Everything from when you would go in there, they would remember you. They know what kind of movies you like and suggest other things. You could call ahead and be like, hey, do you guys have this movie? If it was in, they would hold it for you behind the counter. So it went from that. You might even go to school with the people that work there, or your parents might go to church with the people that own it. They were part of the community that way. And then another way, like one of the guys that was in the interview, Joe from Joe's Video, he was in the trailer. He even brought up the fact that, their store used to support and donate to the local baseball team and have their video, name on the back of the baseball shirts and stuff. So it was a big part of the community because everybody knew everybody. It was like small business owners, so they were a big part of the community.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I can remember this one situation where I went to the video store. I wanted to see Edward Scissorhands. I hadn't seen it at that point. I was like maybe, 10, 11 years old or whatever. So I say, hey, do you have Edward Scissorhands? The clerk looks at me and he goes, oh, a fine movie, a very fine movie. And you wouldn't get that kind of reaction like, like streaming or doing, like, it's just like, having someone recommend something, that's huge, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the video store that I used to go to a lot that I mentioned earlier, Cat Square Superette, when I was younger, I would rent video games from there. And the lady that ran it, if I got a video game and I got home, like first off, that store was only maybe a quarter of a mile from my house. So I could ride my bike there. So I'd ride my bike down there, I'd rent a video game, I'd come back. And if the game was like too hard for me at the time while I was young, I could ride my bike back there and be like, this game's too hard for me. And she just let me switch it out for a game until I was happy, and a lot of times, you can't do that, but she would just let me switch them out with no cost until I was happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what are some of your favorite personal memories of going to the video store?
Yeah. So, when I was growing up, and I'm sure with you guys too, if you got out of school on Friday and your parents were saying, we're going to go get pizza and go to the video store, that was like the best thing in the world to me growing up. Like that was the best Friday night. But let's see, some memories. I have a pretty good memory of one, and it kind of correlates back to the cover art you were talking about. When I was about 12 or 13, my friend Rhett decided to come over and spend the night. And Mom and Dad was taking us to get some pizza and took us to this video store called Mega Video. We would always go in and we'd rent a video game and we'd rent like a scary movie. We'd play the video game most of the night and then watch the scary movie, at the latest part of the night.
Yeah.
So we're looking down the aisles and we see this movie called Elves, and it has Dan Haggerty in it. And it looks so scary on the cover. Like it looks terrifying. We look on the back and it shows these two elves, and they're practical effects suit looking monster elves, and it just looks so scary. So we're like, this is the one. So we got home, and I remember we rented Mortal Kombat. We're playing Mortal Kombat all night. It gets to be about midnight. Everybody's asleep in the house but me and him. And I know it's about that time to watch a scary movie. And I was like, you done playing? He's like, no, let's play some more. And I was like, okay. And then I start realizing, like, I think he might be too scared to watch this movie. So, and I am too at this point. I ain't even going to lie. I was too scared. So I stopped and I looked at him. I said, "Do you want to watch the movie?" And I was just testing the waters. And he's like, "Do you want to watch the movie?" And we just look at each other. And I said, "Are you scared?" And he said, "Yeah." "Are you scared?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want to wait till in the morning when the sun comes up?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do that." So we played Mortal Kombat. The next day we watched the movie, and it wasn't even scary. But, you know, we had... It was all because of that cover art. We were too scared to watch it.
Of course.
That's hilarious. Oh, my God. I remember, well, like I told you, my father got us a top-loading VCR, which, by the way, I have a couple of tapes that I recorded some TV shows on that VCR. To this day, they're the best quality ever, like, because it was such an early model of VCR.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I remember, when we got our first actual video membership, we it was a place called Movies on Video, which was a couple towns over from where we were, and you got this like laminated card with your photo on it, and that you were a member and stuff. And I actually still have mine somewhere, and it's just so funny, you know, how they would go through these elaborate things to get you a membership, you know.
Oh yeah, you had. You know, some video stores, you just get the card. It'd be a paper card. Some of them would have a real laminated card that was all nice looking. Even some of the ones that I talked to, they would give a card and you get a T-shirt showing that you're a member of that video club or whatever. And then you'd have the ones that were free to join. Then you'd have the ones that were $20 to join.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were totally different depending on where you went.
Right. I mean, I remember I stayed over a friend's house one night, and his sister took us to the video store, and because she was over 18, she rented us like a stack of R-rated horror movies. We watched them like all night long. I think Cannibal Ferox was one of them, and just some nasty ones.
Well, that was what was so great. I think everybody that was going to the video store around that time were renting movies we probably shouldn't be watching at that time. But that was part of the joy of it, you know, part of the fun. It was kind of, as a kid, it seemed almost risque, you know, to go in these video stores and be looking at. I'd go look at the horror movies, and then, you know, some of them I'd look around, I'd be like, I probably shouldn't even be looking at these boxes. I didn't even go in the beaded curtain room, but like just the horror section made me think like I need to watch over my back, make sure my mom don't see me looking at these tapes. You know?
That's funny.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't? Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Shark Bites Podcast. It's the greatest show in history. From the Dorkening Network, hosted by a nerd who's named Patsy. From movie reviews to tips on surviving the coronavirus, Shark Bites has it all. Follow us on Facebook and suggest topics at sharkbitespod@gmail.com. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast.
Well, yeah, no, and I can remember going to the video store. Again, I was probably 12, and I would rent. Like, I remember one of the first things I rented, like, that I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna finally rent something that's R-rated on my own. And I rented The Fly, and I rented The Fly and The Fly 2, and like, I bring it up to the counter, and this girl is there, the clerk behind the counter. And I was 12. She may have been 18, but she was like my first crush. Okay, and I'm like talking with her about movies. Like, I'm all cool and shit. And I'm just like, and it was like, it wasn't working. But anyway, but I remember her looking at me like, "Are you a little bit too young to be renting this?" And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But, and then she let me take both movies home. And now to this day, those movies are among my favorites. Particularly, the first movie being a masterpiece. So. Yeah, I mean, that's one of my great memories of going to the video store. Is like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, I mean, it shapes you, especially as a movie fan, because you'll remember renting movies, and it was such a pivotal time in your life that even if it wasn't a good movie per se, you have good memories attached to it, which in turn makes you like the movie more.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, much like, when we had only a handful of TV channels, that's where we got exposed to our movies to begin with. And then when you had the video store, it opened it up for you. So now all of a sudden you have, walls of movies that you could choose from. And the kids just don't have that experience today.
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't. I mean, I tell my kids that, back video stores were so important because if you didn't catch it in the theater, it probably didn't show on TV on one of those channels,
mm-hmm.
that was it. Like, you never seen it again until you rented it, especially like one of the guys we interviewed remembered watching Star Wars. And he's like, for years, I never got to even see Star Wars again because I only seen it one time in theater, until VHS and the video store and all that. So, yeah, if you didn't catch it, maybe that one time it showed on TV or that one time it was in the theater, before video stores, you just didn't see it again.
Right.
Well, and that also is a testament to, like, say, going back to Wizard of Oz. Whenever that movie came on television once a year before video stores, it was like a big event because there was no other way to see it. It's like if you missed it, you missed it. You had to wait for the following year to see it again on television. And then, I'm sure when video stores came out, everybody was renting it. So, yeah, I mean, it's amazing how far we progressed, but at the same time, we're now in a situation where there's too much available in a weird way.
There is.
It's funny that you said that too about Wizard of Oz because you reminded me of that. I remember being in a store, and I don't remember what store it was, but it was right at the dawn of videotapes in my area, and there was a machine, like a vending machine that you could rent tapes from, and Wizard of Oz was the one that they were promoting. It was like. There was a big poster for it and everything. And I remember trying to get my father to rent it. And he's like, no, it's too expensive. I don't know. I don't want to put my credit card in there,
Well, how much was it to rent the tape from the display?
I don't recall. This was 30, 40 years ago.
Gotcha.
Well, see, here's what was bad about ours. On one hand, it was great that we had so many mom and pop stores. But like on the other side, my dad would take us to rent a video and he'd make a membership. And then we'd be late getting it back, and we'd go back into rent, and it'd be such a high late fee. They'd be like, let's find another mom and pop store. So we ended up not being able to go back to half of the mom and pops because we had a late fee, and Dad didn't want to pay it. So
yeah.
And that followed me to when I grew up and was an adult, because I don't know how they tracked that for so long. But 12 years later, I go in, and I'm a junior, my dad's a senior, so we have the same name. And I won't say junior, I'll just say Bobby Canipe, And I'll give them my ID, and I'll look it up, and they're like, oh, you made an account 12 years ago, and you owe $4.50. And I'm like, Let me just pay that $4.50.
That's hilarious.
Did you have any movies that were like your go-to anytime you would go to the video store? Like one that you would like either continuously rent or like one that you would rent over and over again?
Yeah, I had a few actually. So like I told you earlier, my mom pretty much let me rent anything. There was only one movie for some reason she would never let me rent, and that was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which it really isn't even that bad. You know,
right.
But my mom watched it when it came out first in the drive-in theater. You know, everybody was losing their minds over that movie when it came out. It was like the scariest thing they'd ever seen in their life. So she's seen it and it scarred her. So she was like, you can rent anything in the whole store except for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I finally was like, Mom, I really want to see it. And she's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. So I watched it and I loved it. It's my favorite movie in the whole world. But I loved it, but it really wasn't that bad, you know. But I guess it had been built up so much. It's like, this is going to be the scariest thing I've ever seen. But anyway, I love that movie. So I used to rent that a lot. There was a show that used to come on TV that was called Monsters. And it was like Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side. Yeah. So we didn't have cable when I was younger, so I couldn't watch that. But the video store had the episodes on tape. So I could get 2 episodes on each tape. So I used to rent those all the time. So that, Return of the Living Dead 2, I used to watch all the time. You know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2, I loved. Those were really kind of my go-tos. And then when it kind of got into the 90s, and I was about probably 11 or 12, 13, something like that, the 90s movies that were coming out straight to video, like Dr. Giggles, stuff like that. Yeah, I used to rent those all the time. So, so yeah, I'd say probably the Monsters tapes of the episodes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre were the ones I rented the most.
Nice.
Wow. I remember when I worked at Blockbuster Video, I think I had seen it. I ordered to purchase Faces of Death, and then I think I watched it like once, maybe twice after I bought it, and then after a while, a few years later, I just gave it away to somebody. I couldn't watch it anymore. It was too disturbing.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely agree. And I remember being, I guess I was probably 9 years old, and I rode the bike down to the little gas station. They had Faces of Death. I had no idea what it was. But I saw the cover and it looked crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So I rented it at 9 years old, come back, put it in my little 13-inch TV and VCR in my room, started watching it and was like, what is this? And, you know, being a little kid, I was just like shocked, you know, but shouldn't have been rented that at all. But, you know, they didn't do anything. But I remember taking it back and was like, I need to get something different. So I'm looking through and I see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I had no idea what it was, but it said horror, you know? And on the back, it's like a couple's car breaks down and they go into this dark castle, and I'm like, this is going to be great. And I remember getting home, watching it, and being like, what is this? You know, because I did not expect a musical. I thought it was going to be a real horror movie, you know? But, yeah, a lot of crazy stories based on just covers, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing newspaper ads for Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it would only play at midnight, and I always thought it was a really scary movie.
Yep, I did too. You know, it was before the advent of the internet. So you had nothing to go off of,
right?
You know, other than the box, you know. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Now I remember when DVDs kind of came in, and eventually, and I'm pretty sure it was at my the local Hollywood Video where I was living at the time. They kind of switched over slowly from VHS to DVDs, and then when I saw the advent of streaming, I was like, oh, this is not going to be good for the video stores. Do you address that at all in your documentary?
Yeah, we do. We do, absolutely. And I mean, it all boils down to when something becomes more convenient or cheaper to do. So VHS, you know, was out and it was booming. But then when DVDs came out, it was much easier to produce DVDs than it was, you know, a tape. And you could get better quality and special features at a fraction of the cost. So that kind of took over, you know, and then really did get rid of tapes. The last produced VHS tape was in 2006. It was the movie History of Violence. And, you know, after that, it was just, you know, nothing. And then when streaming came out, I mean, I even seen it working at Hollywood Video at the time. I said, this is cheap. You're going to pay $7, $8 a month. You have access to thousands of movies, and you don't even have to leave your house. Like, it is convenient and it is good. You know, and, you know, anytime something better comes along, everybody jumps on that. You know, you've got those people that still love the old stuff. And really, it's more because of memories. I mean, more than anything, because it is more convenient to go stream. 100%. I get it. That's why I don't think video stores will ever come. Like, people always ask me, do you think it'll ever come back? Not to the capacity it was. Not even close. It's going to come back like record stores come back right now, where people just like physical mediums and stuff like that. But yeah, we definitely addressed that because, I mean, it's hard not to because, it's more convenient and it did kill the video store.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I think the younger folk are robbed of the experience that we had going to the video store.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about cover art. When you watch it on TV, like let's say, you're on one of the streaming services, there's this tiny little picture, and the cover art, it's not really a cover, but, the artwork for a particular movie is usually just faces now. There's no actual art, no painting of something happening in the movie.
Yeah, well, like when you would go to the video store back in the day, it was an event. It was that weekend event.
Yep.
You would pile into the car. You would take the drive. You would walk around forever. You'd only pick a handful of movies, 2, 3 movies. And you had a sense of ownership. You took the time. You drove. You picked them out. You come back. You build up anticipation for it. You spent your money for it. If they sucked, I mean, it ain't like you can just back out and pick a different title. Like, that's all you had. So you actually sat through the whole movie. Nowadays, where if you're streaming, if you're watching a movie and you're like, I'm not really digging this, you can just back up and find another movie. You didn't have that sense of ownership back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So now you mentioned earlier that there are stores still running today?
Yeah, there is. So here in North Carolina, and these guys and some other ones are featured in the documentary, we've got Orbit DVD in Asheville. They rented out of their back, and then they sold some. And then when COVID hit, they kind of went to all selling. But they keep that local video store vibe, you can still get VHS there, DVD, stuff like that. So we went and talked to him, Mark, that owns Orbit DVD. We went to VisArt Video in Charlotte, which is huge, and they actually are all rental. They rent VHS, they rent DVD, everything. But kind of what they've been forced to do, there's people renting, but it's not to the level that would be able to keep them open. So they are considered a 501c charity now. Which helps them keep their doors open. Because I do think it's important, like you were saying, kids. When you're talking to your kid and you're explaining these video stores, you can actually put them in the car and say, let's go to VisArt Video and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And you can actually rent a movie and show them the experience of renting a movie and stuff. So I do think it's important. We actually flew out to LA. There's a video store out there called Videotech. And it's amazing. They have so many tapes and DVDs and stuff, and in the back behind the counter, it's like a library with the ladders that are way high in the sky, and you got to like slide them left and right. They got to climb up a ladder to get tapes out. Like, it's just, there's so many movies.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if they're considered a charity, what theirs is, I can't remember, but you can go in there and rent. But I mean, it's cool to have. It's just, it will never come back to the capacity.
Yeah,
that it was.
Well, my grandson is 5, and my wife will take him to the library because it's literally like a couple blocks down the street from us, and they'll rent a DVD from there. And I think it's great that she's given him that experience.
Yeah, and a lot of people do. I haven't been into a library in forever. I should, but I haven't. But yeah, a lot of people have told us they rent stuff there. The library has an app now where you can put in your library card information and you can stream movies, like a streaming service, which is
really
wild to me. Yeah, it's wild that there's a streaming service for the library. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
wow.
It's crazy, and it's totally free, just like a library card is. But yeah, that is neat because, I mean, that in a way is keeping that rental store vibe alive.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's there's actually a store in Connecticut that one that I interviewed, and they also operate as a nonprofit. That's what keeps them open. Like they'll do these like film screenings and film festivals and events, and they serve coffee and have food. I mean, yeah. So it's making it more of like an experience. So I think that's really cool.
That's what VisArt does. They added a screening room in the back.
Yeah.
And they'll do that. And they'll do potlucks each month where they'll do a certain theme. So like ninja movies that you might not have seen, and they'll have a potluck, with ninja movies and stuff. So they're very community oriented.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So now, in making the film, did you find that most of the people that you interviewed did prefer the in-store experience versus streaming, or vice versa?
It's funny you ask that because I try to play devil's advocate. I try to look at it from both sides: the convenience of not having video stores and the memory of video stores. So I would always talk to people on their interviews. and they would be talking about, I hate Blockbuster. Blockbuster killed it. Or they'd say streaming killed it. I wish video stores were still around. And then I'd ask them the question. I'm like, okay, seriously, think about it for a second. If a video store opened up 15 minutes down the street and you could get the same movie on streaming for free, would you take the time to go down there and support them every single week? And a lot of them would really think about it and go, you know what? I don't think I probably would. Well, I mean, most people probably wouldn't. It would be a novelty. You know, you would go every so often.
Sure,
but
right.
people wouldn't, if you've got streaming as an option, I mean, it's just more convenient. I mean, it might not be as fun, but, you know, there's not going to be enough people that would go to it. So
Sure.
I think people, you know, really would stream more often, even if they were available.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I still see people, there's a CVS nearby, and they have a Redbox outside, and I still see people going up to that all the time.
I do too, and that surprises me. You know, honestly. And I honestly think it all boils down to when Redbox usually has brand new movies that aren't on Netflix anymore. I'm assuming that's got to be the only way. Is they're renting them that way instead of putting their credit card in and using like Amazon Prime to rent a brand new movie or something.
Right.
That's the only thing I can think of because it's confusing to me. Like, why would they? You know, but that's the only thing I could think of because there's no compared to a video store. If you went and rented a DVD, you would have that experience of walking in, looking around and stuff. Redbox, there's no experience. You're still swiping through and seeing those bad images of the movie, you know, just like you would be streaming. So I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. Now that I think about it, I remember when Netflix. Obviously, you guys remember too when Netflix first started. It was like rent by mail, and
I was on board. Like 2007, I think, is when I jumped to Netflix. And what I would do, I guess I'm outside the whatever the years where I can get in trouble for it. I'd rent them. I'd rent the seasons and then burn copies of them and then return them just fast so that I had them, you know. And that's what I would do. I would just rent them, make copies, and send them back. And I had so many. I wouldn't even watch them. You know, I would just try to have such a fast turnover. I could get as much as I could in them. But yeah, I remember doing that, man. You know, getting the 3-disc plan where you could have 3 discs at a time. I remember all that.
That's incredible.
Oh yeah.
It's funny. So now, was that sort of the bridge between the video store and streaming services? Because Netflix wasn't streaming at the time.
Think so. No, it wasn't. And I 100%. I think that was the first step toward having that ease of access. You didn't have to drive anywhere; it comes straight to your door. So I do think it was like the middleman in between the video store or the physical medium and the streaming. You know, they were just one step away. They just had to figure out how to get you the movie without having to send it to you physically, which they did. You know, and I think they came along at a perfect time. They had a perfect plan because if you remember, Blockbuster tried to do the same thing, and it didn't take off.
Right.
So, Netflix just happened to be the first one, and they did it right.
Yeah. Interesting. So, aside from Texas Chainsaw, do you have a handful of favorite horror movies, or even, as you mentioned before, like the ones that were shot on VHS?
Yeah. So, like I said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 74 is my favorite movie of all time. But now, a lot of the ones that I really like was the shot on video ones of the 80s, and not where they weren't really a well done movie or anything, but I could see that this was somebody that was really trying. They had a vision. They had a lot of passion for it. I really enjoyed Truth or Dare and Killing Spree from Tim Ritter. Cannibal Hookers and Demon Queen from Donald Farmer was really good. 555 has got a great cover art, but the movie's horrible. Lunch Meat by Kirk Alex, same thing. Great cover art and great idea, but the movie was bad. But I love all those, and all those are either shot on 8mm or shot on video. You know, because it was just so easy to shoot on video back then, and video stores were booming so much that guaranteed a video store is going to buy your movie if it's available on video, even if it's horrible.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, some of those are my favorite ones. Cannibal Campout by John McBride is a hugely pivotal movie for me because that was probably the first shot on video movie I ever seen, and I got it because of the cover art. And I watch it now, and it's not a really well done movie, but at like 8 or 9 years old, watching with my mom, it seemed like such a scary movie. Like it seemed so real and gritty and raw. But yeah, that was a huge pivotal moment in my life. Was watching Cannibal Camp Out for sure.
Wow, that's awesome. So we've got a series within the show that Chris and I have been doing where we're trying to help people introduce others to horror movies, and and of course there's no exact way to do it. So our method, our recommendation is we're starting with the Universal classics, and we've gone back and we've talked about all the Dracula movies, the Invisible Mans, the Frankenstein and the Wolfman films, and we're going to be moving on to the 50s and do the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Where would you recommend somebody start if they were going to get into horror movies?
And you want me to say pertaining to Universal Monsters or in general horror movies?
In general, horror movies can be any kind. We just happen to choose the Universal ones.
I would honestly pick what I consider classics. Nightmare on Elm Street would be a great start.
Mm-hmm.
If I picked a Friday the 13th, I probably wouldn't pick the first one. I'd probably pick like part 4. Right when he's like full in, he has his hockey mask, like he's all in. So yeah, I'd say Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, part 4, something along those lines is probably what I would get. Halloween would be a great one.
Yeah,
that's a classic. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favorite movie. I'd love to say that, but I don't think that's a good starting point. But yeah, I if I had to pick, I'd probably say Halloween. I'd probably say the original Halloween.
Nice, awesome,
nice.
So when is the documentary going to be released?
So I hope to start editing in April. I've got a couple other film projects I'm working on with some friends throughout April. So if it might push it a little bit into May before I'm completely done editing. But I hope that by the mid of May, we're completely done and we have a product done, ready to roll.
Awesome. Well, we definitely want to have you come back when you release it. And we can talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Can you tell the folks at home how to find you online?
Yeah, so we use Facebook a lot. That's our primary. We have Facebook and Twitter. But the easiest way to find us, just go to momandpopdoc.com. A page will come up that has all of our links. It's got our IMDb, it's got our YouTube link, it's got our Facebook, it's got our Twitter. So whatever social media you use, you can kind of click there and it'll take you straight to it.
Awesome. So, yeah, Bobby, you've got an open invitation to come back at any time to promote, your next project or just talk about movies.
Awesome, man. I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Oh, and I didn't ask. Can you tell us about your video podcast?
Yeah. So we just started it. A buddy of mine, Tyler, that is a wonderful cinematographer, and my friend Josh, who's he works at a big haunted attraction that's been here for about 30 years, like a local one called Booger Woods. Me, him, and Tyler all started just a little podcast where we talk about movies. We're still kind of toward the beginning of it. We're only about 4 or 5 episodes in, but really what we focus on is movies and the filmmaking aspect of it, since we all like to work on movies. So we'll talk about, movies that we've seen, what gets us excited about it, and then we'll also talk about our projects, or we'll have guests on. Like we had David Howard Thornton from Terrifier on, talking about the filmmaking aspect. We talked to some cosplayers that do, parts in movies, if they need like background work and stuff like that. And we just talked to the guy that did the makeup special effects on the new Scream, and then he goes all the way back to Killer Crocodile, an Italian horror movie he worked on. He worked on Ninja Turtles, the live-action Ninja Turtles from 1990.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had him on, and wonderful episode. He had so much knowledge, but we talked to him. He worked on the Lost Boys pilot for the TV show that was never made or never finished past the pilot. So yeah, dude had a ton of stuff. So yeah, we just cover filmmaking and movies basically on the podcast, and it's a video podcast. Well, it started out as a video podcast on YouTube, but I think we're just going to go solely to audio and be on Spotify, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
Nice.
And can you briefly touch upon Universe Retro and the Tiny Terracon?
Yeah. So Universe Retro is pretty much how I make my money. I started it a little over a year ago. During COVID, my job kind of changed. I had worked for AT&T for years and years. And when the job changed, it basically changed to a telemarketing job over the phone, and I did not want to do that. So, I talked to my wife, and we decided I'm leaving AT&T, and I'm going to jump into this venture that I've kind of always did for fun, which is, basically thrifting, buying retro stuff, and then reselling. So that's what I do. I do a little bit of stuff on Facebook, but primarily I do it on eBay. You can check out all my stuff, by just searching the seller Universe Retro on eBay. And it just sells anything that I tell everybody, it's stuff that I grew up liking. I really don't go outside my wheelhouse. If I know about it, I'll sell it. If I don't know about it, I don't even deal with it. But T-shirts, retro vintage T-shirts, band shirts, video games, comic books, toys, movies, stuff like that. And then Tiny Terracon we started last year, me and my friend Jacob. There was no affordable horror convention in our area for people. So we thought, let's do a smaller scale horror convention, call it Tiny Terracon. We have a handful of guests. It only costs $5 or $10 to get in. And then people have an opportunity to meet these people from the movies without having to pay $50 to get into a big, horror convention. So last year we started it. It went really great. We planned it all, the first one in 2 weeks. We got Felissa Rose, Dave Sheridan, R.A. Mahelnoff, who played Leatherface in part 3. And we had Adam Minarovich from Ankle Biters, Walking Dead, stuff like that. It went great, really great. So we're planning the next one. This year we got Naomi Grossman from American Horror Story, Ari Lehman from Friday the 13th. We're going to have a total of 10 guests this year. And we decided next year we're going to go to 2 days, and we're dropping the tiny because it ain't tiny.
Yeah.
So, So we're going to be North Carolina Terracon starting next year. So yeah, pretty much been staying busy.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Nice.
Well, good for you, man. Thanks for joining us today. And like I said, you have an open invitation to come back anytime and talk about whatever you want to.
That'd be great. I'd love it, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was awesome, huh?
Yeah, that was awesome. And it brought back a lot of memories of going to the video store again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too. I didn't bring up, at one point when I was working at Blockbuster, a buddy of mine became not the general manager, but like one of the managers of the store. So like he would, close the store and everything. And It was me, him, and this girl that worked there. Blockbuster was always open till midnight. So after midnight, he locked up, and we were supposed to clean up, and we ended up having a water balloon fight.
That's awesome.
And nothing got damaged, surprisingly.
Wow. And nobody saw remnants of it the next day?
I don't recall. I wasn't in the next day, so I don't, if they did, they probably figured some little kid left it there or something.
Oh, okay.
That's one thing I didn't like about working at Blockbuster, because I was in college, so I would only work like Fridays and Saturdays or Saturdays and Sundays, and you'd close at midnight, and then it took you 2 hours to go through the whole damn store to clean up the messes that everybody made. It's like, because you had the cover box and then the video behind it.
Right.
And so people would they'd move them around. They would it would just be a disaster at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
So, well, yeah, folks, we will let you know when his documentary comes out. Mom and Pop, the indie video store boom of the 80s and 90s. So we'll let you guys know that. Okay, folks, that is all the time we have today. Be sure to check out Bobby's documentary, Mom and Pop, the indie video store boom of the 80s and 90s, when it comes out, and we will, of course, let you know when it comes out. You can send your feedback to thenisnow42@gmail.com. You can also join in the conversation at our Facebook Then Is Now podcast group. Then Is Now podcast is a proud member of the Dorkening Podcast Network, so please be sure to check out the other great shows there at thedorkening.com.
And you can find me on my website, which is storiesmotion.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at storiesinmotion. You can also visit our website at havenpodcast.com, where you'll find our sister show, The East Meets the West, in which we discuss Shaw Brothers films and spaghetti western movies. And while you're there, check out the Patreon and TeePublic links to get some exclusive stuff.
And Then Is Now is on YouTube, so please visit youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1 to get the latest videos as well as other fun videos. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and hit that little bell so you get all the notifications when we post a new one. And also share the video versions of our podcast with your friends and get them to subscribe as well. Don't forget to go wherever you download your podcast from. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, please leave us great reviews there so that more listeners can find us. You can find us on all the podcasting apps, especially the big three, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Class dismissed.
The Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.
For more shows like the one you just heard, check out the Dorkening Podcast Network at thedorkening.com.